Commander Zexthul of the Galactic Defense Force had seen many things in his 40 cycles of military service. He had witnessed the brutal efficiency of the Krillian war machines, observed the terrifying hunting rituals of the Vorthak predator clans, and even survived an encounter with the legendary Draconian berserkers. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he was about to witness on the human colony world of Terra Nova. The massive Korath battlecruiser, Bloodfang, hung in orbit above the peaceful human settlement like a dark omen. Its captain, Warlord Greshkar, was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most feared military commanders. His species, the Korath, were 8-foot-tall reptilian warriors with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws. They had conquered 17 star systems through sheer brutality and had never encountered a species that could match their savage nature in combat. "Prepare for planetary bombardment," Greshkar growled, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "These soft-skinned humans will learn what happens when they refuse to surrender their mining rights." Zexthul shifted uncomfortably in his observer position on the bridge. The Galactic Defense Force had sent him to document Korath military tactics, but this felt different. Something about the humans troubled him. Intelligence reports suggested they came from a world designated as a Class 12 death world, yet they appeared so fragile and peaceful. "Sir," the ship's scanner operator hissed, detecting multiple human life signs in the settlement's central area. "They appear to be gathering." Greshkar's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. "Excellent. They're probably cowering together for their final moments. Open a communication channel." The main screen flickered to life, showing an aerial view of the human settlement. What they saw made the entire bridge fall silent. Instead of terrified colonists huddling in fear, hundreds of humans were spread across a vast open field. They appeared to be engaged in some sort of organized activity. "What are they doing?" Zexthul whispered, leaning forward. The humans had divided themselves into groups, each wearing different colored clothing. Some wore red, others blue, and they seemed to be facing off against each other in formation. At the center of it all, a single human held what appeared to be a small, spherical object. "Perhaps it's some primitive religious ceremony before death," suggested the scanner operator nervously. Greshkar snarled in disgust. "No matter. Their rituals won't save them. Charge the plasma cannons." But before the order could be carried out, something extraordinary happened. The human with the sphere suddenly threw it high into the air, and chaos erupted. The humans began moving with a speed and violence that defied everything the Korath knew about supposedly peaceful species. They collided with each other with bone-crushing force, their bodies slamming together with impacts that would have hospitalized most civilized species. Yet they seemed to relish it. "By the void," breathed the weapons officer, "they're attacking each other." But it wasn't random violence. There was a terrifying organization to it. The humans moved in perfect coordination, creating formations that shifted and flowed like liquid death. They tackled each other to the ground with devastating efficiency, piling on top of fallen opponents in ways that looked like torture. Zexthul watched in growing horror as a massive human, easily 6.5 feet tall and built like a siege engine, caught the spherical object and began running. Immediately, every other human on the field converged on him like a pack of hungry predators. They hit him from all sides simultaneously, a coordinated assault that sent him crashing to the ground with earth-shaking force. "Incredible," Zexthul whispered. "They're practicing warfare against each other." The human who had been tackled simply stood up, apparently uninjured, and handed the sphere to another warrior. The process repeated. But this time, the new carrier employed different tactics. He dodged and weaved through the attacking forces with inhuman agility, sometimes leaping over opponents or spinning away from grasping hands with movements that seemed to defy their species' supposed limitations. "Look at their strategy," the scanner operator said, his voice trembling. They're not just fighting, they're studying each other, learning weaknesses, adapting. Greshkar had gone completely still, his predatory instincts recognizing something far more dangerous than he had initially understood. These humans weren't engaging in random violence or panic-driven combat. They were training for war in a way that was both systematic and utterly brutal. The most disturbing part was their apparent enjoyment. When humans were tackled, they laughed. When they successfully brought down an opponent, their teammates celebrated. When they failed, they immediately analyzed what went wrong and tried again. Enhanced zoom on Sector 7, Zexthul commanded. The screen focused on one particular group of human warriors. A smaller human, perhaps only 6 feet tall, was surrounded by opponents much larger than himself. Instead of surrendering or showing fear, he smiled. Actually smiled. Then he exploded into motion, using leverage and technique to throw his larger opponents to the ground with casual efficiency. "How is that possible?" the weapons officer gasped. "The smaller one should have been overwhelmed." "They train their weakness into strength," Zexthul realized with growing dread. "They don't just practice fighting equally matched opponents. They practice overcoming superior force." The Korath bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the training session continued. Humans practiced combat maneuvers that involved throwing themselves at the ground to avoid attacks, rolling and twisting their bodies in ways that maximized both offensive and defensive capabilities. They rehearsed group tactics that involved sacrificing individual warriors to create opportunities for their teammates. Most terrifying of all, they did it with joy. "Sir," the communications officer said shakily, "we're receiving a transmission from the human settlement." "On screen," Greshkar commanded, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. A human face appeared on the display. It was a middle-aged male with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He looked completely relaxed, even friendly. "Greetings, Korath vessel. I'm Mayor Davidson of Terra Nova Colony. We noticed your ship in orbit and wanted to invite you down for our annual sports festival. We're just finishing up our rugby tournament, but we've got football starting in an hour and boxing matches this evening. Always room for spectators." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. Greshkar stared at the screen for a long moment. "They call this sport?" Zexthul felt a chill run down his spine as the implications hit him. "Warlord, if this is how they play—" The sentence hung unfinished in the air, but every warrior on the bridge understood the terrifying truth. If this level of organized violence was how humans entertained themselves, what would they be capable of when they actually went to war? The Korath boarding party materialized in the human settlement's main plaza exactly 1 hour later. Warlord Greshkar had decided that a closer inspection was necessary before any military action could be taken. What they had witnessed from orbit defied every tactical manual in the Galactic Defense Force database. Greshkar led a squad of 12 elite Korath warriors, each standing over 8 feet tall and armed with plasma rifles and molecular blades. Their reptilian armor gleamed menacingly in Terra Nova's afternoon sun. Behind them, Commander Zexthul followed with his recording equipment, determined to document whatever fresh horror awaited them. Mayor Davidson approached with the same relaxed demeanor he had displayed during the transmission. He was flanked by several humans of various ages, all of whom seemed remarkably calm considering they were facing a squad of heavily armed alien warriors. "Welcome to Terra Nova," Davidson said cheerfully, extending his hand in what Zexthul recognized as the human gesture of greeting. "Glad you could make it down. The rugby finals just ended, but you're just in time for the main event." Greshkar stared at the extended hand suspiciously, but did not take it. "We are here to assess your military capabilities, human. We witnessed your warriors engaging in combat training." Davidson's eyebrows rose in confusion. "Combat training? Oh, you mean the rugby match? That's just a game, friend. Wait until you see what we've got planned for the afternoon entertainment. Games? Zexthul stepped forward, his translator working to convey his bewilderment. You call that organized warfare a game? A younger human, barely out of adolescence, laughed. Rugby's nothing compared to what's coming up. Hey, Mayor, should we tell them about the gladiator event? The color drained from Greshkar's reptilian features. Gladiator event. Mixed martial arts tournament? Davidson explained proudly. Annual championship. We've got fighters from all over the sector coming to compete. Real crowd pleaser. Before anyone could respond, a thunderous roar erupted from somewhere deeper in the settlement. The sound was so loud and so filled with bloodthirsty excitement that every Korath warrior instinctively reached for their weapons. That'll be the crowd getting ready for the next match, Davidson said casually. Come on, I'll give you the VIP tour. Against their better judgment, the alien delegation followed the mayor through the settlement. What they saw along the way only deepened their growing sense of unease. Human children, some no more than 10 or 12 years old, were engaged in activities that would have been classified as military exercises by any civilized standard. A group of youngsters were practicing something called dodgeball, which appeared to involve hurling projectiles at each other with violent intent. The children laughed as they were struck, immediately picked up more ammunition, and returned fire with improved accuracy. Teaches hand-eye coordination and tactical thinking, one of the human parents explained when she noticed the aliens staring. Plus, it's great cardio. Nearby, other children were engaged in an activity called tag, which seemed to be a simulation of hunt-and-capture scenarios. They moved with surprising stealth and speed, employing flanking maneuvers and coordinated ambush tactics that would have impressed seasoned military strategists. Your offspring, Zexthul said slowly, they train for warfare from childhood? Train for warfare? The parent looked genuinely confused. They're just playing, having fun. The delegation continued through the settlement, passing areas where humans engaged in increasingly disturbing activities. A group was practicing something called parkour, which involved throwing their bodies through the air and scaling obstacles in ways that suggested extensive infiltration and escape training. Useful for emergency situations, Davidson mentioned when he saw the aliens watching. Plus, it's a great workout. Another area featured humans engaged in rock climbing, ascending vertical surfaces using nothing but their natural grip strength and determination. What made it particularly unsettling was that some of them were climbing without any safety equipment whatsoever, apparently trusting their lives to nothing but skill and courage. The free climbing section, Davidson noted proudly, takes real guts to try that. One of Greshkar's warriors leaned close to whisper, Commander, these humans appear to deliberately seek out dangerous situations for entertainment. The observation proved prophetic when they reached the main arena. Thousands of humans had gathered in a massive outdoor amphitheater, all cheering and shouting with an enthusiasm that bordered on feral. At the center, two humans were engaged in single combat that was both brutal and mesmerizing. Unlike the earlier rugby match, this was purely individual warfare. The two fighters circled each other like predators, their movements flowing between striking, grappling, and ground fighting with seamless transitions. When one managed to take his opponent down, the crowd erupted in approval. Mixed martial arts, Davidson explained over the roar. Combines techniques from dozens of different fighting systems. Boxing, wrestling, martial arts from our home world, plus innovations we've developed since colonization. Zexthul watched in fascination and horror as the two humans battled. Their techniques were sophisticated beyond anything he had expected from a supposedly peaceful species. They employed joint locks that could break bones, choke holds that could render an opponent unconscious, and striking techniques designed to cause maximum damage to vital areas. What made it even more disturbing was the obvious respect and friendship between the fighters. Between rounds, they embraced and encouraged each other. They were literally trying to cause each other grievous bodily harm, yet they clearly cared about each other's well-being. "They practice war against their friends," one of the Korath warriors whispered in disbelief. "And they enjoy it," another added. The current match ended when one fighter managed to apply a chokehold that rendered his opponent unconscious. Instead of finishing off his defeated enemy, the victor immediately checked to ensure his opponent was uninjured and helped him to his feet. The crowd cheered for both fighters equally. "Beautiful technique," Davidson said appreciatively. "That rear naked choke was textbook perfect. The timing, the leverage, the control, poetry in motion." Greshikar found his voice. "This human was rendered helpless. Why did the victor not eliminate him?" "Eliminate him?" Davidson looked shocked. "This is a sport, not a death match. The point is to test skill, not kill people. Though we do have some more extreme variations." "More extreme?" Zexthul asked with growing dread. "Oh, sure. We've got the cage fighting championships next month and the no-holds-barred tournament in the spring. Plus, there's always the underground fight clubs for people who want something a bit more intense." As if summoned by his words, an announcement echoed across the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next competitors. In the blue corner representing the Mining Guild, we have Sarah Bulldozer Martinez. She's undefeated in 17 matches and holds the record for fastest knockout in the welterweight division." The crowd erupted as a human female entered the arena. She was perhaps 5.5 feet tall and appeared to be in her early 30s. To the untrained eye, she might have seemed unremarkable. But Zexthul's military experience allowed him to recognize the signs of a born killer. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, her eyes constantly scanning for threats and opportunities. "And in the red corner," the announcer continued, "visiting us from the agricultural sector, we have James the Hammer Thompson. This is his first tournament, so let's give him a warm Terra Nova welcome." The second fighter was considerably larger than his opponent, standing well over 6 feet and possessing what appeared to be significant physical advantages. Yet there was something in Martinez's expression that suggested size would not be a determining factor in this encounter. "The female will be disadvantaged by her smaller stature," one of Greshikar's warriors observed. Davidson chuckled. "You might want to reserve judgment on that. Sarah's got some moves that'll surprise you." The match began, and within seconds, the Korath delegation understood that their assumptions about human combat capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. Martinez didn't try to match her opponent's size and strength. Instead, she used speed, technique, and what could only be described as controlled ferocity to systematically dismantle his advantages. She flowed around his attacks like water, striking precise targets that disrupted his balance and coordination. When he tried to use his reach advantage, she closed the distance with explosive speed. When he attempted to grapple, she used leverage and technique to turn his own strength against him. The fight ended when Martinez executed a throw that sent her much larger opponent crashing to the ground, then immediately transitioned to a submission hold that forced him to surrender. "Magnificent," Davidson applauded. "Classic judo throw followed by a perfect armbar. Textbook execution." Greshikar stared at the scene in stunned silence. A human female weighing perhaps 60% of her male opponent's body weight had defeated him using nothing but skill and tactical superiority. The implications were staggering. If human females were capable of this level of combat effectiveness, what could their actual warriors accomplish? As the sun began to set over Terra Nova, Mayor Davidson guided the increasingly disturbed alien delegation toward what he cheerfully described as the evening's main entertainment. The Korath warriors had become noticeably more cautious in their movements. their earlier swagger replaced by the wary tension of predators who had discovered they might actually be prey. "Now, this next event is really special," Davidson said with obvious pride. "We only do it once a year, and we've got participants coming from 3 different solar systems for it." Commander Zexathul's recording equipment had been working overtime, documenting what was becoming the most disturbing intelligence report in Galactic Defense Force history. "What manner of combat ritual is this?" he asked nervously. "Combat ritual?" Davidson laughed. "Oh no, this isn't combat at all. This is pure entertainment. We call it extreme obstacle racing, though some folks prefer the old Earth term tough mudder." Greshkar's translator struggled with the unfamiliar concepts. "Tough mudder?" "You'll see. It's basically a test of endurance, strength, teamwork, and mental toughness. About 15 miles of obstacles designed to push people to their absolute limits." They emerged onto a viewing platform overlooking what could only be described as a deliberately constructed nightmare. Stretching into the distance was an obstacle course that seemed designed by someone with intimate knowledge of every possible way to torture a living being. The first obstacle was a series of electrified barriers that participants had to crawl under while partially submerged in ice-cold water. Beyond that was a wall of fire that had to be leaped through, followed by a pit filled with what appeared to be some form of acidic mud that had to be traversed using only rope swings. "By the void!" whispered one of the Korath warriors. "They voluntarily submit to torture." "Oh, that's just the beginning," Davidson said enthusiastically. "Wait until you see the razor wire crawl and the hypothermia tanks. Those are real crowd pleasers." Hundreds of humans were lined up at the starting line, all of them practically bouncing with excitement. They wore minimal clothing despite the challenging obstacles ahead, and many had painted their faces with bright colors or intimidating designs. Some carried team banners, while others had messages written on their bodies in what appeared to be their own blood. "Are these condemned criminals?" Zexthul asked weakly. "Criminals? Heavens no. These are volunteers. We had to turn away over 1,000 applicants. This is one of our most popular events." An air horn sounded, and the humans exploded into motion. What followed was perhaps the most harrowing display of deliberate self-destruction the aliens had ever witnessed. The first wave of participants threw themselves into the electrified water without hesitation. The electrical current caused their muscles to spasm and their faces to contort in obvious agony, yet they laughed as they pushed through. Those who fell behind were helped by their teammates, who risked additional exposure to assist fallen comrades. "They're helping each other endure torture," Greshkar observed with growing horror. "That's the whole point," Davidson explained. "Nobody gets left behind. It's about pushing beyond individual limits and supporting your team." The fire obstacle proved even more disturbing. Humans literally leaped through walls of flame, their clothing often catching fire, yet they rolled on the ground to extinguish themselves and immediately continued running. Some participants suffered visible burns, but their teammates quickly administered field medical treatment and encouraged them to continue. "They tend their wounded and return them to battle immediately," one of the Korath warriors noted. "Their battlefield medical protocols are extraordinarily efficient." The acid mud pit revealed yet another terrifying aspect of human nature. When participants fell from the rope swings into the corrosive substance, instead of panicking or calling for rescue, they worked together to form human chains and ladders, using their own bodies as tools to extract their teammates. "Look at their problem-solving capabilities," Zexthul said, his voice tight with suppressed fear. "They adapt to unexpected situations instantly and employ creative solutions that sacrifice individual safety for group success." But it was the razor wire obstacle that finally broke the Korath warriors' composure. Humans crawled on their bellies under strands of actual razor wire, allowing the sharp metal to cut into their backs and arms rather than risk disqualification. Blood flowed freely, yet they continued forward with grim determination. "This is insane," Greshkar breathed. "They're deliberately inflicting wounds on themselves." "Well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs," Davidson said cheerfully. "Besides, the medical station is right there at the end. We've got excellent trauma doctors." The hypothermia tanks were the final straw. Participants had to submerge themselves in tanks of near-freezing water for a full minute before they could continue. Zexthul watched in fascination and terror as humans emerged from the tanks blue-lipped and shaking uncontrollably, yet still managed to run to the next obstacle. "They're conditioning themselves to function while suffering from environmental extremes," he realized. "This isn't entertainment. This is the most sophisticated military training program I've ever witnessed." "And they do this voluntarily?" Greshkar asked in disbelief. "Oh, yes. In fact, we have to limit participation because demand is so high. People save up vacation time and travel across the galaxy just for the chance to compete." As the last participants crossed the finish line, the aliens witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for cycles to come. The humans who had just spent hours deliberately torturing themselves immediately began planning for next year's event. They discussed ways to make it more challenging, more dangerous, more extreme. "We should add a climbing wall with variable gravity," one bloodied participant suggested enthusiastically. "How about an obstacle where we have to solve math problems while being electrocuted?" another added. "Oh, or we could do it in zero-atmosphere suits to add the challenge of oxygen deprivation." The humans weren't just willing to endure suffering for entertainment. They actively sought out new and innovative ways to push themselves beyond reasonable limits. Greshkar turned to his warriors, who had all gone pale despite their reptilian complexions. "Immediate withdrawal to the ship," he commanded quietly. "But, sir," one of them protested weakly, "our mission parameters called for planetary conquest." "Our mission parameters," Greshkar replied, "did not account for a species that considers torture recreation and treats warfare as casual entertainment." As the Korath delegation made their hasty retreat, Mayor Davidson called after them. "Hey, you're welcome to come back anytime. Next month we're having a marathon, and in the spring there's a triathlon that includes swimming through a pool of genetically modified electric eels." Back aboard the Bloodfang, Greshkar stared out at the peaceful human settlement below and came to a decision that would reshape Korath military doctrine forever. "Navigation," he commanded. "Set course for Korath Prime, maximum speed." "Sir, shouldn't we file a conquest report?" his communications officer asked. Greshkar was quiet for a long moment before responding. "File a reclassification request instead. Terra Nova and all human settlements are to be designated as Category 1 restricted zones. No Korath vessel is to approach within 10 light years without express authorization from the High Command." "On what grounds, sir?" Greshkar looked at the data Zexthul had collected. Humans who laughed while being electrocuted. Humans who helped each other through deliberate torture. Humans who considered bloodshed and pain to be entertainment. "On the grounds," he said quietly, "that any species insane enough to do this for fun would be absolutely unstoppable in actual war." 3 months later, the Galactic Defense Force issued new tactical guidelines based on Zexthul's report. Human space was reclassified as a no-conflict zone, not because humans were particularly advanced or numerous, but because military strategists throughout the galaxy reached the same terrifying conclusion. If humans considered electrocution, hypothermia, razor wire, and acid burns to be recreational activities, then their actual military capabilities were beyond calculation. No species in the galaxy wanted to discover what humans considered appropriate for real warfare. The legend of the Deathworld species spread quickly through military channels. But it wasn't humans' weapons or technology that earned their fearsome reputation. It was the simple, undeniable fact that they were the only known species that voluntarily participated in activities that would be classified as war crimes if done to prisoners. And they called it fun.